What's up, slashes and slashettes? My name's Nightfall, and welcome to a bit of a different kind of video. Today, instead of discussing anime or playing a game, I'm mixing both of those ideas together and discussing a game. Today's topic of discussion is my top 10 most wanted original and top 10 most wanted licensed chapters for Dead by Daylight, or as the title suggests, my top 20 most wanted chapters. In this video, I'll only be discussing the bare minimum, such as who I want for Killer, who I want for Survivor, and I might touch on the killer ability here and there. If you would like videos where I come up with these concepts as full-on, fledged-out chapters, comment down below, and I will be more than happy to do so. In fact, I even have some stories of my own that I can use. With that out of the way, let's get to the video. First, let's talk about what original chapters I want. This mainly focuses on the killer though, as survivors are basically just reskins of each other. So really, instead of original chapters, this segment will be more about original killers, except for one or two. Starting off with number 10, we have a flying killer. This could be anything from a giant bat-based killer, to a vampire, to God knows what. I haven't really given this idea much thought, as I want it simply to see how behavior would implement it as a killer. I mean, since it can fly, loops, as well as just walls in general, would be practically useless. So I'm really interested on what they would come up with, and how they would try and balance it. Next up is number 9, which for me is another gun user. I know this isn't the most popular, but I have no idea why. I've wanted a soldier as a killer for a long time. Though his melee would probably be a bayonet, just like Deathslinger, I also feel like they could make his bullets not that powerful by both limiting them, and also maybe giving them an effect similar to Trickster's laceration meter. Even though I've wanted this for a long time though, I'm not the biggest fan of range killers myself, both playing and versing them. Plus, it'd also probably just be a Hillbilly Bubba situation, except with Deathslinger and the soldier. With number 8, let's take a break from killers actually, and let's talk about a survivor. I really want to see a serial killer as a survivor. I can see his perks making him a good aura reader, as well as maybe making one stronger the more injured his teammates are. I just think having a killer as a survivor would be interesting. Kind of what Legion is supposed to be, where he's supposed to be a survivor that's a killer almost kind of thing. You know what I'm trying to say. But except taking that to the much more literal sense. For number 7, I would like to see a killer focused on slowing survivor movement. I know we have Clown as well as Freddy with his dream snares, but maybe a more refined version of that ability. A killer idea that I see come up a lot that could fit this ability would be a spider-based killer who uses spiderwebs, both to get information on survivor locations as well as to slow their movements. Next up for number 6 would be a fire type of killer. An idea that could work is actually one from my own horror stories. In this story, the slasher, who is the main antagonist, obviously, sets up traps that explode into flames, burning the victim's body as well as any evidence he may have left behind. This could be incorporated via trapping windows, pallets, or even generators. Basically like Trapper, except with fire. For number 5, we desperately need an underwater chapter. Underwater is arguably my biggest fear, so much so that I can't even go near rivers or even ponds because it terrifies me so much, both in real life and in video games. I mean, even just talking about it made my voice crack at the beginning of the segment. As a killer with a water-based power, I could see it being some sort of swamp monster, a pirate, or some weird water spirit deity thingy. Honestly, this probably has one of the more diverse killer pool to choose from, pun intended. Next up is number 4, and it is a medieval chapter. Whether it is a king trying to get revenge for his kingdom, or a knight defending what he believes is his new kingdom, we desperately need a castle map and a medieval chapter. The reason why I was about ready to say medieval survivor is because the next line in my script is, with this chapter, it's not just limited to a medieval killer. Me and you guys, we all know that the entity pulls people from different points in history, but we've only really seen that with the killers, at least to a drastic extreme with Plague. So we can kind of get a medieval survivor to show that's not just killers that can be plucked from any time. Moving on, we have the top 3 now, and it starts off with freezing. This could be literal freezing via ice, or some type of paralysis or petrification. Cool killer ideas could be a Yeti, Wendigo, or even a Gorgon. Much like number 10 on this list though, I really want to see how they would implement such a strong ability. Number 2, I want a killer capable of hindering a survivor's eyesight. This could be some shadow creature that darkens their vision, or my personal favorite, a killer that surrounds. Wow, you really heard my West Virginian accent coming out there. Hoorah! Um, this could be this could be a killer that surrounds survivors in a thick fog, preventing them from seeing their surroundings. And finally, the big bad, pun intended, number one. I want a werewolf. Werewolves are by far my favorite horror creature and one of my favorite creatures just in folklore in general. There can be so many ways to create this killer and so many ways to interpret his ability. Some ideas I've seen have been to just make it a replacement for Demogorgon and replace his portals with burrows, but a werewolf deserves so much more than to be a recycled idea, and I really hope we get one soon. Now on to why most of you probably clicked on this video. It's time to talk about my top 10 most wanted licensed chapters. Starting off at number 10 is Outlast. Now I know this may seem low to some of you guys, but I have no idea what Outlast is like. I haven't played it, I haven't watched it, nothing. The only reason I want it is because I know it's iconic, and Resident Evil and Silent Hill have chapters, so logically Outlast will get a chapter at some point. Continuing on with number 9, we have Slender Man. Once again, this has nothing to do with the games or even the character of Slender Man because I personally don't find them scary, nor do I like the games. Hi, Checkers. Who's your pretty boy? Sorry, my dog distracted me. However, I can put my own bias aside, as I know Slender Man is an extremely iconic character within horror. Also, his ability would probably be really unique, so it'd be cool to see what they do. Continuing with the horror video games is number 8, SCP Containment Breach. It would be a fun and unique chapter. I mean, unlike Slenderman, I do find some parts of the game scary. Yes, I know, SCP isn't just a game, it's a lot like creepypasta, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to be talking about the game, as that's what most people know. On top of that, it'd be interesting to see what SCP they choose for the killer. Would it be 173 or some other creature? As well as how they would make the abilities work within the realm of the entity. Next up at number 7, we have Alien. The killer would be a xenomorph, with the survivor being Ellen Ripley. Now, personally, I have never watched Alien, though I know what a xenomorph is and what it does. And this really wasn't on my want list until I watched the concept trailer made by Rarithlynx. I will link it down below. Once I watched it, it really got me thinking about just how terrifying a xenomorph would be, and it really got me excited for it. Definitely recommend watching the concepts on Rarithlynx channels. Just by the way, again, I'll link it down below. Coming in at number 6, we have Happy Death Day. The killer would be the baby face, and the survivor would be Tree Gelbman. As for what the killer's power would be, I honestly have no clue, but Happy Death Day was one of the best slasher films I've seen, though I do have yet to watch the sequel. Next up, we have the Big 5, kicking off with The Last of Us. The Last of Us is my favorite zombie game, second only to the Left 4 Dead franchise. Now, I don't really like zombies, or movies and games with zombies in them, so me saying that really speaks volumes to how good it is. It could be a survivor only, like Bill and Ash, with the survivors being Ellie and Joel, mostly Joel as he, spoiler alert, dies. Also because I prefer Joel to Ellie, just my personal opinion. But anywho, it could also be a full chapter with the killer being a bloater. I feel like the spores that the bloaters throw, as well as their size and stature, would make for a great killer and ability. At number 4, we have Bioshock, with the killer being the Big Daddy, and the survivor being Jack Winand, whatever. If you're going with the original game, that'd probably be the best bet because he was the first protagonist. However, Booker DeWitt is also a good choice for survivor, as he's the one from Infinite and probably the most well known. The Big Daddy's power could be a drill rush of sorts, and he will definitely be a uniquely sized killer given how big he is. Honestly, seeing a Big Daddy charging at me in a Rapture map gives me chills just thinking about it. Starting off the big 3, we have one of my favorite slasher films, My Bloody Valentine, specifically the 2009 remake. It might be hard to tell, but slashers did have a huge inspiration on the design of my avatar you see before you. I mean, I do start my videos by calling you slashers and slashettes. But anywho, for this chapter, having Tom Hanniger as a killer with the original Axel Polmer as a legendary would be really cool, especially with the survivor being Sarah Mercer or Sarah Polmer, whichever name they choose. The only thing about this chapter is that I have no clue what the killer's ability would be. In both movies, the antagonists in the original and remake are traumatized by Harry Warden, a serial killer called the Miner, which eventually leads to them taking on his mantle, with Tom in the remake having a split personality between Tom and Harry. I think somehow incorporating that into his ability would be perfect. Maybe you start off as Tom Hanniger and act as a survivor, but instead of repairing generators, you damage them, undoing the progress survivors are making. After doing that for a certain amount of time, you can then switch to Harry Warden and gain an increase in movement and braking speeds. Or they could make it to where Tom was taken after he killed the rescuer and escaped the mine, as it's implied that Tom Hanniger persona no longer exists. But I don't know what his ability would be if they were to do that. All in all, I think My Bloody Valentine is kind of an underrated movie I never hear talked about, and being my second favorite slasher film, I would love to see it get some recognition. Next up at number 2, we have a Five Nights at Freddy's chapter with Springtrap as a killer. This just needs to happen. And if you want to learn more about why he fits in, I will link a Schmukles video where he discusses why he fits in Dead by Daylight, as well as another Rarithlynx video discussing the concept. Again, this just really needs to happen. I'm not as big a fan of FNAF as I used to be, but Springtrap would just be a perfect fit nonetheless. Coming in at number 1 is my favorite franchise of all time, both in and out of horror genre. That, of course, is Friday the 13th. Bring along with it my favorite slasher as well as the king of horror, Jason Voorhees. I absolutely love Friday the 13th. I've seen every movie countless times, including Jason X and the remake with Jared Padalecki. Obviously the characters would be from Friday the 13th. Obviously, the killer would be Jason, and the survivor could really be a lot of people, but it'd probably be either Tommy Jarvis or Clay Miller, as Tommy is one of the most well-known characters of Friday, with Clay being the protagonist of the remake. As for Jason's power, he would absolutely not be the same as Trapper. Within all of his movies, he only ever uses the bear trap once, and that's in the remake. He is by far the most versatile killer in slasher films, and I think his power would reflect that. I think maybe he would stalk a survivor. Once a survivor is fully stalked, the next hit would cripple them, instead of taking them down a health state, unless they are completely healthy, in which case they will be both injured and crippled. This would allow Jason to lead chase with the survivor and apply pressure elsewhere, as he will not be allowed to hit them until their stalk cooldown is over, as doing so will just cripple them again and restart the timer. Once their stalk cooldown is over, however, survivors still remain crippled until downed or hooked. While the survivor is crippled, their movement and action speed is decreased significantly and they take much longer to heal than normal. However, healing them completely will remove the status effect. Once a survivor is hooked for the first time, and once they are unhooked, so once they have reached the second phase of hooking, they take longer to stalk. Once they are fully stalked, they will be given the exposed status effect, much like Ghostface, until their stalk timer runs out. Once they enter the struggle phase, so once they are on death hook, they take even longer to stalk. But fully stalking them would allow Jason to perform multiple different types of moris on them depending on where they are. For example, if they're near a locker, he could use the doors to kill them, or if near fire, he could burn them alive, etc. Basically, he's a combination of Michael Myers, Ghostface, and Pyramid Head. And I think this ability allows him to be played in several different ways, and pays homage to how versatile of a killer he can be. And that's that. My top 10 most wanted original and top 10 most wanted licensed killers. What do you all think about my list? And the abilities I created for the killers? What are your guys' lists? And would you like me to do fan-made concepts of any of these killers? Let me know down below. And with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If it's your birthday, happy birthday, and I'll hopefully see you all soon. Goodbye.